news, but also the challenges with major and mega gifts. Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the fundraising school, and I'm joined today by Jessica Browning. She's the principal and executive vice president at the Winkler Group. And through that association, she is also part of the Giving Institute. And Jessica, thanks so much for being with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us about the Winkler Group. What work do you folks do?
We focus on capital campaigns and then capital campaign planning. So we do a lot of donor assessments, donor capacity building, all leading up to those to that capital campaign.
And through your association with the Giving Institute, you recently wrote an intriguing, provocative article about the comments that are often made about the over-reliance on mega gifts. The data will come out from Giving USA that shows charitable giving in the United States. And some folks will point out, yes, but so much of that money comes from a smaller number of people. And even in a typical campaign or an annual fund, there's such a reliance on a small number of large gifts. Can you help our audience understand your perspective, the main points you were making in that article?
Yes, and in our practice, we are really seeing this problem with the rise of mega gifts. First, I want to acknowledge the generosity of donors like McKenzie Scott. They're really putting so much philanthropic money into the philanthropic economy, which is wonderful. But I think at the same time, it's creating these problems. It's very tempting for development professionals, advancement professionals to court these major donors. They can raise a lot of money from one or two people. And in the process, because they're focusing on these major gifts, they're kind of letting all the other donors, the mid-level donors, some of the smaller donors, really your donor pipeline, they're not focusing on that the way that they should. We're seeing that donors, it's particularly acute in the community service world, the human service world, that they don't really understand their donors. They don't know their philanthropic passions. They don't know what brought the donor to the organization. Instead, they're focusing on the larger donors. They're also doing a lot of low touch efforts like events. We've seen the rise in giving from foundations, kind of eclipsing or taking over part of the pie, the giving pie from individuals. So they're focusing on foundations. And it's creating this challenge within the world of philanthropy that you have giving overall being propped up by these mega gifts. When if you were to take these major gifts out of the equation, I think giving in the United States would look very dire.
Jessica, we hear these statistics, and again, they're all over the place. Gallup says 81% of households donate. The General Social Survey says 88% of households donate. But, there's also the statistic that gets a lot of media attention that only 50% of households are donating. But what that statistic is not saying is that 100% of people were asked and 50% said no. And the thing, I guess, I just want to ask why. Why is this the situation that you're seeing with fundraisers? Because we join our nonprofits because we care about the mission. We're passionate about the mission. And fundraising is finding people whose philanthropic values and motivations align with that mission. So why do you think fundraisers are focusing just on those larger major donors and not doing that broad-based acquisition across all income levels, let alone the ongoing stewardship to understand why a donor is contributing?
But I think they're looking at ROI for a single year, not looking at the long term. They're really focused on how much can we raise from this one person. If I, as a fundraising professional, have the potential to raise my entire revenue goal from 5 or 6 people, sure, that's very, very tempting. But you brought up the point that you brought up about the statistics, I think, is extremely interesting because I think our definition of generosity has changed. We're not going to church as much as we used to. So we're not teaching our children how to give. They're not looking at us putting money in that plate. When we go to the grocery store, we're being asked to round up. If we buy a pair of socks from a certain brand, they'll give a pair of socks to someone in need. So I think when people say, do you give? yeah, sure, I round up my 75 cents at the grocery store. But if you look at giving, if you go a little bit deeper and you look at giving as a percentage of our disposable income in 2022, which is the most recent year that we have this data, only 1.7% of our disposable income went to charity. This is the lowest rate that's on record. It ties with 1995. But there's some really fundamental shifts going on in the world of philanthropy today. And mega gifts are certainly part of it, but they're not the only problem.
Well, the other understanding about generosity perhaps ties into one of your earlier comments, in that we only use the word generosity when we talk about McKenzie Scott, and not about that woman who puts $20 into the plate at her religious congregation, or candidly, the person who rounds up at the hardware store. So is that part of the issue, that, fundraisers and nonprofits, when they think of generous and they think of donor, are only thinking about folks with more money? Because again, when we do look at some of those household statistics, the households least likely to be counted are those that are moderate to lower income.
Yes, you're exactly right. We're also seeing trends, external trends in terms of government giving. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was passed in 2017, by raising the standard deduction, it really took away that taxable incentive for those mid-level donors and the lower end donors to give. So at the same time, you have the rise of the mega gifts, and then you have this. We as fundraising professionals let Congress take away this taxable incentive to give, and it's a bit of a perfect storm coming together.
In addition to the folks who we hear are bunching, where they're putting that charitable gift into a savings account and donating 3 and 4 years later so they can exceed the new higher level of the standard deduction. Jessica, let me ask you this question. I'm sure there are people listening going, yes, I'm feeling this. You're telling my story here, but it's my CEO and my board, and they're telling me I need to go get these larger gifts. The more bigger gifts we can get faster, the better. What advice do you have for fundraisers as they try to lead up and be more inclusive across all income classes and focus not just on major and mega donors?
That's a really, really good question, because I think that is where a lot of the pressure is coming from. They're also pressuring to get new donors. And so what we are telling our clients is help your board, educate them on some different metrics. Elevate things like the lifetime value of a donor. Help them to understand the importance of that. Help them understand retention rates and why it's so important to focus on retention rates more than acquisition rates. Look at moves management. Have some sort of metric that shows the progression of donors along their journey from a lower mid-range up to that major donor. If we can get boards and even executive directors to understand the importance of this, I think that's a really big step. We like to say that your donor portfolio should look like a stock portfolio. This is something certainly boards understand. It needs to be diversified. We've seen in our practice what happens if you rely on just a few major donors, and then what happens if a new executive director comes in and really alienates those donors. They're going to go somewhere else, and then you're stuck.
Earlier on, you also mentioned the importance of stewardship. And that's the word that came to mind when you talked about, just not spending a lot of time with donors, doing the quick touch instead of the high touch and long-term touch with the donors. What advice do you have, Jessica, for fundraisers in that area of stewardship? The types of practices that they should be instituting. And again, not saying that they don't want to do that. Maybe there's pressure to receive the gift and move on to the next donor. But how important is donor stewardship in this conversation? What advice do you have for fundraisers?
Stewardship is critical. You have to. And I think it goes beyond just sitting down and having coffee. But think about the donor. And sure, this takes a little bit longer. This is why we advocate for smaller major gift portfolios, so you can get a little bit deeper. But it's about understanding those philanthropic passions. Go beyond coffee, or if you invite them to coffee, ask them, what brought you to this organization? What are your philanthropic passions? Sometimes we see organizations that say, sure, I know our donors. I know that they open our newsletter. I know that they come to our golf tournament. They like our posts on TikTok or Facebook. That's not really knowing your donors. Stewardship is really understanding your donors. I can give you a firsthand example. William and Mary, which is where I went to graduate school, their advancement office recently reached out to me, understanding that I am passionate about the nonprofit sector. They asked, would you be interested in being a guest lecturer for one of our business classes? And I said, sure. Since then, I've been a mentor for a graduate business class. William and Mary is considering they're considering a graduate degree in nonprofit management. They asked if I would be interested in providing some input on that. Sure, that is good donor stewardship. That's understanding a donor's passion. It's also getting that relationship out beyond just the advancement office to some of those frontline, the faculty members. So stewardship is critical, but it's giving our major donor gift officers that chance to be a little bit more creative. Just so important. It's also about stewarding our developments and advancement staff the way that we would steward our donors. It's what, as you know, the nonprofit world, especially the nonprofit fundraising world, is rife with turnover. So if we can keep staff and keep them longer and help them develop deeper relationships, that's really good stewardship as well.
Well, Jessica, that is great advice. And I appreciate what you said at the outset as well. Appreciate everything you said today. But at the outset, when you said, we're grateful for these mega donations, we're grateful for these major donors. That's not what this conversation is about. It truly is a conversation. I guess the word that I would use, Jessica, is inclusive, that we're more inclusive in our fundraising, reaching out to a broader range of donors. I love that stock market analogy. I'm going to be quoting and citing you from this point forward when I teach. Love that image. What other advice might you have for fundraisers as, again, they're passionate about the cause, they enjoy being with their donors, sometimes they're getting that pressure from the CEO and or the board. Any other advice that you have for fundraisers with this topic of stewarding your current donors, but also being more inclusive across all income ranges?
It's looking for ways to bring them in. We see a lot of donors wanting that insider access. I think you can do this at a lot of even the lower levels. Maybe it's the executive director having a town hall meeting, a virtual town hall meeting with the donors. It's bringing in some of your key stakeholders into your strategic planning process. Once the strategic plan is in place, it's taking that plan and sharing it individually with your donors. You can share it with your lower level donors in one way that's less high touch. Maybe your major donors, you sit down with them and say, I really want to tell you where we're going in the future. If they had their fingerprints on creating that strategic plan, even better. Just get a little bit creative, but put yourself in the mind of the donor.
Jessica Browning is Principal and Executive Vice President of the Winkler Group, and you can see why her wisdom is relied upon at the Giving Institute, which funds the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy and our annual publication of the Giving USA data. These are the types of conversations that we have in our curriculum at the fundraising school. 24 public courses in all, and these courses lead to 4 different certificates. On fundraising, yes, talking about who is a donor. What is our organizational readiness? How do we build our annual fund? How do we translate that into major gift fundraising and comprehensive campaigns and planned giving? And what is the role of foundations and businesses? That is all covered in our Principles and Techniques course, and then separately in individual courses. And today with Jessica, we talked about leading up. Topics such as those are covered in our leadership courses, leading to a certificate in fundraising leadership. So that's one of the 4 certificates. We have these public courses in person and online, and we can bring you those courses just to your nonprofit, your association, your region, or we can custom tailor curriculum just for your specific needs. So public courses and custom training, quarterly webinars, these weekly podcasts, and of course our textbook, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, now out in the 5th edition. All of these resources are available. Get a pen. This is a long email, a long website address. It's philanthropy.indianapolis.iu.edu/the fundraising school. Grateful to our guest, Jessica Browning from the Winkler Group, and a podcast produced today by Jennifer Boffman and Mike Anthony. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. Now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the fundraising school.